Thank you very much for your attendance. This forum is a continuation of a series of similar gatherings sponsored by citizens from Milford to bring together the various departments of the town of Milford and its citizens in an informal setting to both learn what role that department provides and to give feedback in a constructive, positive manner to that department. So to date, we've had similar forums with the town administrator, the Parks Department, the Board of Health, the building inspector, the highway surveyor, the police, and finance. By the way, 2019 is our 5th anniversary of being an organization. Thank you. Okay, Donna.
As Steve said, tonight we are fortunate to have the school administration with us and the school committee. The school administration is represented by Dr. Kevin McIntyre. Kevin, would you mind introducing the other members of the administration, please?
And just a note to the audience, this microphone isn't for amplification, it's just for Milford TV, so you're not going to hear us any louder when we speak into the microphone. The questions are going to be picked up by a boom mic, so we're not going to be handing the microphone into the audience either, just for your information. So first I want to introduce our school committee members who are here present this evening. We've got Chris Wilson standing sheepishly in the back. He's going to come up and join us. No worries. We've got our school committee chair, Joe Callery, our vice chair, Jen Parsons, school committee member, Joe Marias, and school committee member, Meg Hornberger. To my immediate right is our high school principal, Josh Otlin, our assistant superintendent for curriculum, instruction, and assessment, Craig Consigli, our director of English language learners, Jen Noorjanian, and our director of special education, Lucy Jenkins. Do you guys want me to pass it back to you before we start, or do you want us to? Okay, sure.
Thank you. Here's a brief overview of the program tonight. Dr. McIntyre and his team will provide you with a 30-minute overview of the school department, touching on how it's organized, how it operates, its goals, special programs, finances, and so forth. Then following that, that 30 minutes, it's going to be your meeting. The floor is open to the citizens who attended to ask questions or clarifications and engage in a meaningful, respectful discussions with your school administrators and or your elected school committee. Donna and I will moderate the interchange.
Kevin, I'd like to welcome you to the floor so that it's all yours.
I'm going to be very brief, and then I'm going to turn it over to my 4 colleagues sitting to my right. We're going to talk about 4 things today. We're going to talk about how do we measure impact. Secondly, we're going to talk about the Milford High School progress and data. Then we're going to speak about English learner programming, and finally, just a very brief overview of special education. When we break for question and answer, please feel free to ask any questions, even if it's not related to the actual presentation. So this is our education plan and our 4 key strategic focus areas. And those 4 areas are social emotional learning, growth-focused instruction, equity and access, and continuous learning. And everything we do in the Milford Public Schools is focused on those 4 areas. And you'll see as the presenters speak, they'll be kind of speaking to some of these either directly or indirectly. What I'd like to do right now is have Assistant Superintendent Craig Consigli come up and speak about how we're measuring the impact in the Milford Public Schools.
Thank you. Hold your applause. I appreciate that. So first, I'd like to keep these 2 empty seats right up front. And these 2 empty seats are for 2 students I'm going to share with you the profile on. So in this seat, we have William. William is a grade 5 student, and both of these students are grade 5 students. He's a lifelong resident of the town, comes from a 2-parent home. Both parents are highly educated. One's a doctor, one's a teacher. Dad and mom are able to attend all kinds of information nights. Might be here in the audience today, for example. William has a younger sister, and his interests include things like sports, Legos, fishing, Fortnite, and building computers. And William aspires to be in the major leagues, to play baseball. On the other hand, our other student, who's also a fifth grade student in the same class, Jasmine. And Jasmine is a fifth grade student, like I said, is also a lifelong resident. Jasmine lives with mom only. Mom cleans houses during the day, and then at night from 4 to 12 goes to a convenience store to work. Mom is from Brazil, speaks Portuguese, speaks English, but has never gone past the 8th grade, so it's difficult for her to help with homework when she is home, to help with homework. Mom can't really support after school, and Jasmine takes care of her 2 brothers while mom is at work. Her interests include poetry, art, singing, fashion design, and outer space. She aspires, and can only see this far, to be in the school chorus, because unfortunately she can't, because she has to be home. So these 2 students, and we're going to keep this here because I want everybody to kind of realize and remember why we're here. We're here for our kids, right? All right, so how do we measure success? Now, these 2 students are very different, but also very typical. I wouldn't call them an anomaly on either end. It's kind of an average, I guess. All right. So in the classroom, basically we have tiered instruction in our classroom. So tier 1 instruction is basically your general class. So your general class, it's the teacher teaching to the class, personalizing instruction and differentiating instruction based on the needs of the students in the class. But picture 25 students in a classroom. That's your tier 1. If the teacher identifies a certain need or has given an assessment and finds that there are skills that a particular group of students is missing, then they might go to a tier 2 type of instruction, or say like reading intervention. A student is struggling a little bit in a particular skill in reading, so they may go off and be pulled out of classroom for a 20-minute skill lesson with a reading intervention teacher. That's tier 2. If tier 2 didn't seem to be working and they need something more intensive, they may go to a tier 3, which is more of a one-to-one with a specialist. On top of that, we have other specialized instruction, like English language development for our English learners, speech and language services, or OT and PT. All right, yeah, you can flip to the next. Okay, so different assessments that we use to measure whether or not instruction is working, that classroom teachers use. So currently, we are piloting a benchmark assessment system, iReady. iReady is being used at Woodland Elementary School. It's a system to ensure that all students are meeting certain benchmarks. So we would give that kind of an assessment probably 3 times during the year. We're also piloting Star 360 at the K2 schools, does the same kind of thing. We're trying to figure out which one's going to be the best tool for our district. That's measuring just strictly reading and math. All right, so common assessments. Our teachers get together and they work on common assessments together. They may build those together, or they may use a test from, say, everyday math and use that as a common assessment to see if all the students are performing on par or where teachers need to reteach. Formative assessments. Formative assessments are given, say, either in the middle of a lesson or at the end of a lesson. It's just a quick check to make sure that whatever was taught during the day, during the lesson, the students understood. So it may even be as simple as Give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down if you understand. It could be something called an exit ticket, where a teacher may put 2 or 3 questions on a slip of paper, kids turn in on the way out the door. And then summative assessments. Summative assessments are things like unit tests or chapter tests. Those are given at the end of a unit, and it's to see if kids really were able to understand what was instructed. Next, please. All right, so MCAS. I think we all know about MCAS, but MCAS is given really over the course of 2 or 3 days. It's given in the spring. Typically, the language arts reading comes around the end of March or so, and then the math is pushed out until May. All students in grades 3 through 8 take those assessments. In science, in grades 5 and 8, they take those. As far as accountability goes, math and ELA are the only tests that are measured for that. In high school, students take math, ELA, and science, and they must not fail in order to obtain a diploma. There's rarely students that fall into that category by the time they graduate. However, if you've completed all the requirements of the high school and haven't passed MCAS, then unfortunately you don't receive a diploma. Again, it's odd that would happen. All right, so this year they made some changes with MCAS. It's not just, in the past it was based on your achievement scores. This year they've changed it so that it also includes your growth scores, the English language proficiency, attendance scores, and then graduation rates as well. And then we also have to give access testing. So access testing is for our EL students, our English learners. We actually are currently taking those right now. And the tough part about access testing, and I think Jen will talk to this too, so I'm sorry if I'm stealing what you're going to say, is all of our EL teachers right now are giving our access testing. So when that's happening, services have to stop because we have to give the tests. And all of the EL students are currently taking it in speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So they have all those different components that they need to do. All right, next. And then quickly, so we're looking, I know that MCAS right now is really the measurement that's out there in the public, and people see MCAS scores. And we don't think that that's I know it's not a full picture of what's going on in our schools. And I think Josh will show you some other things about MCAS, but I think it's a narrow focus about how well our schools are doing. So we're looking at some other tools that we can use to kind of show everybody how well we're doing across a broad range of different measures. So we're looking at performance assessments. Performance assessments are a set of assessments that are given throughout the year, probably 3 times, 4 times throughout the year. And the best part about performance assessments are they give the teacher immediate feedback, unlike the MCAS. So when students take the MCAS, teachers don't get the results till the summer, so they can't make adjustments with the students in front of them. They can make adjustments, but it's not until they see the kids the next year where they can actually do anything about it. When you're giving performance assessments, they're happening multiple times throughout the year, so you can make adjustments to your practice during the year and really help kids that are in front of you. The other thing with the school quality measures, if you flip actually to the next screen, yeah. So the school quality measures provides a framework where there's 3 different inputs. So you have inputs on teacher leadership, school culture, and resources, which will then give you these outputs. What's it doing for academic learning? What's it doing for community and well-being? So it would be a dashboard of information that would include demographic data, survey data, and then performance assessment data. So that's one of the things that we're looking at to provide the public with a more robust understanding of how we're doing as a district. So I'm actually going to turn it over to you, to Josh.
Good evening. My name is Josh Otlin. I'm the principal at the high school. And I'm going to move very, very quickly through a lot of information. And I want to just sort of let you know up front that I'm going to be deliberately very brief out of respect for your time. But be very happy to answer questions at the end and go back and focus in on any one of the things that I'm going to show you now. So Craig was talking about the way that we measure impact. And I want to be very sort of explicit around sort of how we define success at Milford High School. We measure success in terms of what happens to our kids after they graduate, right? We want our students to go on to be socially responsible citizens. We want them to be independent, happy adults. That means that they're able to pursue their career goals, that they can enter into a field that has opportunities for advancement, where they can support themselves and their families, and they can be contributing members of their community. So I'm particularly interested in college graduation rates and career outcomes. So on this slide, I want to start over here on the left. The state makes a good deal of data publicly available to us about what happens to kids after graduation, but it's a bit old, and that's just sort of the nature of it. So the most recent data that we have on full post-secondary outcomes for our students goes back to 2008, 2009, and 2010. And what you have here on the left is some data from those three graduating classes of 08, 09, and 010. So here on the left, you'll see that in the 3 months immediately after graduation, 68% of kids were in a college classroom, right? And 32% of kids were not in a college classroom, which means that they're in the workforce. So that's pretty significant. So this data is 10 years ago, and 1 out of every 3 of our graduates is in the workforce 3 months after graduation. Okay. I want to note, by the way, that in 2008, 2009, 2010, this was the start of the accountability system in Massachusetts, and Milford High School was labeled a level 1 school at this time. So 1 out of every 3 students from the classes of 08, 09, and 010 were in the workforce after graduation. Of those who went to college, if you follow those students 6 years out, 71% of them completed a degree, but 29% of them didn't, which means they dropped out. Right? So 1/3 of the students who went to college ended up dropping out. And so if you take it all together and you say, well, 6 years after they graduated from high school, what percentage of the kids had achieved another educational credential, a 2 or a 4-year degree? 49% of them had achieved another 4-year degree, and 51% of them had not. So they were in the workforce without any additional educational credential beyond a high school diploma, which is troubling to me. If you look at our college enrollment, most recently from 2013 through 17, blue is 4 years, so we're generally sending about 67 to 70% of our graduates onto 4-year colleges. And 2-year colleges is the purple band, that's ranged a little bit more between 6 to 10%, and anywhere from about 24 to 29% of our students are in the workforce. So we're actually about 7 years out from this data. We're sending a slightly lower percentage of students directly into the workforce more recently than we did back in 2008, 2009, 2010. I want to talk next about what we know about career outcomes. And we actually have very limited data on career outcomes for our students, but the state just this past year, for the first time, has started to provide some career data for us, which is, I think, critically important for us to think about where we need to go as a school. So this is the most current data that we have from the state is for students who graduated in 2015, and this data comes from 2017. And this is students who are in the workforce. And so the state was able to capture data on 56 students from the class of 2015. That's 21% of the graduating class. So this isn't every student who's in the workforce, but this is most of the students who are in the workforce after graduation. And we're seeing that most of these students are working in retail and food service, and they're earning poverty wages. This, to me, is very concerning, and I'm going to talk to you about how we hope to address it. But it's also not surprising, because Milford High School is not a vocational school. We're not providing specialized job training. And this is one of the consequences, is if you don't provide specialized job training to students and they go into the workforce directly after graduation, they can only sell unskilled labor on the market, and that's when they end up in retail or food service. I want to talk a bit about sort of core strengths now against that backdrop of sort of college outcomes and career outcomes, because that's what matters to us, what happens to kids after they graduate. I think it's very important to point out that there is no question that Milford High School offers a world-class academic program, and the proof is in the pudding. It's where our graduates go to college. And our very best students go to the very best colleges and universities in the United States of America, which you can see up here on the screen. These are schools from the past 3 years that our graduates have been admitted to and are attending. And I'm a proud graduate of the Milford Public Schools. I went to one of the schools that's up here on the list, and Milford, for a long time, I think, has been able to deliver a very high caliber academic program, and we continue to be able to do so. I think another real strength that we have at Milford High School is prior to my arrival, and as some of you may know, I'm just 1.5 years into my time at Milford High School, is Milford High School has very rapidly expanded its offerings in what we call CTE, Career and Technical Education, which, as I think you can deduce from the prior data, I think is a high priority for us, is to make sure that we're offering quality career readiness education for our students. So this is the 6th year that we're offering our hospitality and tourism management program, the 2nd year that we're offering our business and banking program, and this is the 1st year that we're offering a building trades program. I think another core strength is that we've made some very impressive accountability gains of late. So every year the state ranks all of the high schools in the Commonwealth. And the green line on the chart shows you sort of our trend in rankings. You can see in 2015, our rank was 24. We bottomed out in 2016, where we ranked 17, just a marginal jump in 2017, and then a big jump last year. We went from 19 to 30. And I think what's interesting is the blue line is our percentage of non-economically disadvantaged students. And so what I would assume as an educator and as a student of education is that as your percentage of non-economically disadvantaged students goes down, that you would see your performance go down in the accountability system. And what you see here is that we've done the opposite, which is as we've served fewer and fewer non-economically disadvantaged students, we've actually been able to make some pretty significant gains in the rankings. So a question that I sort of wanted to look into was, I said, we can't be the only high school that is serving an increasingly disadvantaged population. And I wonder what has happened with other high schools that are serving an increasingly disadvantaged population as well. And so between 2016 and 2018, our percentage of economically disadvantaged students increased by 8.3%. And so I said, let me look at all the high schools in the Commonwealth that over that 2-year period also had an increase in economically disadvantaged students of at least 8%. And I came to find out that we're one of 31 high schools in the Commonwealth that saw that kind of growth in economically disadvantaged students. And that's 13% of the high schools in the Commonwealth. And I said, how is our change in rankings compared to those schools who are similar? And I was really pleased at what I found. What I found is that our growth in rankings was the best in the state amongst high schools that have also seen this kind of growth in their economically disadvantaged population. So the way this is listed here on the screen is Lowell is up top, which had an 8% change in economically disadvantage. And as we go down, the change gets greater. Our colleagues in Chelsea, 24.5% increase in economically disadvantaged students over just 2 years. Dramatic change. So all the schools on the left of the bar, that shows you that their ranking dropped. So for example, Framingham, their economically disadvantaged population increased by 9% over the past 2 years, and their rankings dropped by 22 points. Okay? Whereas we increased by 8.3%, and our rank increased by 13. So not only do we top the cohort of schools that have been going through similar demographic change, the next best is Nantucket High School. They increased their rank by 6 points. We more than doubled that. We increased our rank by 13 points. So I think one of the core strengths of Milford High School is that we've demonstrated an ability to respond to changing demographics and to frankly punch above our weight. And so that's something that I'm very pleased about and I think is one of our strengths at the high school. So we have, in my mind, 2 key challenges going ahead that we face as a school. One is I think that we have a significant and sort of dire unmet need for career and technical education for students who are going into the workforce. And secondly is that the demographic change that I just began talking about is we're in the middle of a long-run process of profound demographic change in Milford. And so I want to talk a little bit about the implications of that and how we try to respond. So first on the unmet need for CTE programming. It's very important to sort of understand that the situation we find ourselves in the Blackstone Valley Regional Vocational Technical System is unlike that of any other vocational system in the state. And so for me as the Milford High School principal, I'm working in a context that I would argue is absolutely singular and unparalleled. What you see here on the left, these are, each dot represents one of the schools in our regional vocational system. The size of the dot represents the percentage of English learners in the school, and that's the number that you see next to each school. This is an average of data between 2015 and 2018. And on the x-axis on the left, this is the percentage of economically disadvantaged students, and the y-axis is the percentage of students that are attending college. And you can see that Milford's the furthest to the right, so we serve the highest percentage of economically disadvantaged students of any school in the regional collaborative. But our college going rate exceeds that of actually most of the schools in the collaborative. If you go to the right, however, this is students attending four-year private colleges. And now you can see that Milford, that red dot sort of drops down significantly. I'll talk more about four-year private colleges in a moment. And I think what's really significant is you can see here, this small dot is Blackstone Valley Tech. This is the regional vocational school that our students feed to. And so on the left, you can see that we're sending slightly more graduates to college than Blackstone Valley Tech. But Blackstone Valley Tech is sending quite a bit more students onto four-year privates than Milford High School is. This isn't surprising when we start to kind of dig into some of the data about Milford High and Blackstone Valley Tech. So back in 2007, BVT is in gray and Milford is in red. We're serving the same amount of economically disadvantaged students. And over the past 11 years, there has been a dramatic and radical divergence in the demographic profile of the students that we're serving at school. Whereas you can see in 2018, we are serving 3 times as many economically disadvantaged students at Milford High School vis-a-vis Blackstone Valley Tech. What's, I think, really noteworthy is that the circumstances that we face in our system, again, are without parallel in the state. So on the left is when you look at the percentage of economically disadvantaged kids in a collaborative, you can see that BVT is probably about a third of the way down the list. The one up at top is Minuteman, so that's not surprising. It's towns like Lexington, Arlington, Belmont. You're not surprised that that collaborative has the lowest percentage of economically disadvantaged students. Although BVT is about a third of the way, our collaborative is about a third of the way down in terms of the percentage of economically disadvantaged students living in those towns, BVT serves the smallest percentage of economically disadvantaged students of any vocational school in the Commonwealth. Okay? They serve the smallest percentage of economically disadvantaged students of any vocational school in the Commonwealth. And so we get college outcomes that I think are actually quite predictable. And I'll show you in a moment how we can predict them. BVT has the highest percentage of graduates from any vocational school in the Commonwealth attending college. And they have the highest percentage of graduates from any vocational school in the Commonwealth attending a 4-year private college. And the reason that this is predictable is because there's an extraordinarily strong statistical relationship between the concentration of poverty in your school system and the rate at which students go on to college and private 4-year colleges. So you'll see that Milford, which is here in red, sits on the trend line. And so for those of you who know stats, this means that if you were to tell me the percentage of economically disadvantaged students in Milford, I can predict for you, without looking up, what percentage of our kids go to private 4-year colleges. BVT is on the trend line as well. So simply by knowing the percentage of economically disadvantaged students at BVT, we can accurately predict what percent go to private 4-year colleges. And we can see these are all the high schools in the Commonwealth. So there's an extraordinarily strong relationship between the concentration of poverty in your school and what percent of kids are going on to college. I want to talk a little bit about private 4-year colleges because completion rates at college vary substantially based on the type of schools that students attend. Where private 4 years is where you see the highest completion rate. And as you heard me say earlier, I care a lot about college completion. And you know, for kids who go to 4-year privates, they're graduating at rates of about 73%. On the far right, kids who are going to 2-year publics, even if you take into account transfers, you know, they're completing degrees at a rate of about 33%. Right? So relatively poor outcomes for our 2-year schools. I think many of you know, many of you have probably sent children through college or in the process of sending kids through college. There's a huge disparity in the cost of these different types of institutions. And so these are average costs from 2018. You can see that a private 4-year is more than double the expense of a public 4-year, and is more than, it's approximately 4 times the expense of a public 2-year. And so access to private 4-year education is very much determined by family income. This is a slide I want to take a moment on. I think this is incredibly important. So this data comes from the largest longitudinal study of post-secondary outcomes in American history. The study was completed in 2015, dealing with data that comes about in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so each of these 3 panes represents different socioeconomic groups of students, so low, middle, high. So these represent affluent students, middle-class students, economically disadvantaged students. And each of the quartiles represents students' level of math achievement. There's a lot of educational research showing that a student's performance on standardized assessments on math is highly predictive of a lot of professional and educational outcomes. And what we see is that the very best low-income students in the United States of America complete college at a rate of 41%. The very best students in this country who are low-income complete college at a rate of less than 50%. Okay? This is the same as upper income students who are below average, who are in the second quartile, who complete college at the same rate at 41%. There are tremendous barriers to college completion for economically disadvantaged students, regardless of how talented they are as students. And I think that's something that we need to be very, very cognizant of in thinking about the needs of our community and the needs of our school. Because, as I stated earlier, we're going through a long-term period of profound demographic change. Before I share with you sort of how we're changing, I want to draw a point that Craig alluded to earlier. We have this ranking system in the state, and I shared with you earlier that we've made gains in the ranking system that is the best in the state for schools that are going through this type of demographic change, which I'm very pleased about. But I also need to be clear that from my perspective, our accountability system, while in a marginal manner tells you something about the work that's going on in a school, that the accountability system tells you largely about the demographics in the school. And I would argue that our system ranks demographics and not school quality. This is every high school in the Commonwealth. And on the y-axis is rank, and on the x-axis is the percent of economically disadvantaged students. And for any of my friends out there who know statistics, so the p-value is less than 0.001, and the r-square is 0.72, which in social science is an incredibly strong statistical association. 72% of the variation in rank is explained by the percentage of economically disadvantaged students in a school. The size of the circle represents the percentage of English learners in the district. So you see that all of our top-ranked schools in the Commonwealth all come from communities that are serving very low percentages of English learners and very low percentages of economically disadvantaged students. Any school that's indicated in blue here is a school that has more than 8% English learners. And I think it's worth noting that there is only one high school in the Commonwealth with more than 8% English learners who ranks above 50, which is, I think for most of us, we assume, 50 is sort of average, right? Above average. There's only one school in the Commonwealth who has more than 8% ELs that ranks above 50, and that's North Quincy High School. North Quincy High School has the largest percentage of Asian students in the Commonwealth. The second is Lexington. North Quincy's first. 59% of their students are Asian. So here's Milford, right? And you'll see that of schools that have a similar composition of English learners, 8% or more, and have as many or more economically disadvantaged students as we do, the only school that ranks higher is Somerville High School. Okay? I hope we'll beat them next year. Okay? But it's worth noting that Somerville High School still ranks below, they rank it a little below 40. Right? There's only one school with more than 8% English learners in the Commonwealth that ranks above average. Okay? And that's North Quincy High School. That is the largest percentage of Asian students of any high school in the Commonwealth. Second is Lexington. So we're seeing an explosion in economically disadvantaged students in the Milford Public Schools that we've only just begun at the high school. So Milford High School is the red line. So in 2015, we were under 20% economically disadvantaged. We're up at 28% this year. Brookline and Memorial and Brookside, which are the yellow and blue lines up top, those are our K-2 schools. These schools are both at, they're coming up on 38% economically disadvantaged. So it's, over the next 6 to 8 years, our population of economically disadvantaged students is going to, it's going to rise to roughly 40%. We're seeing sustained growth in our population of English learners. Jen Noorjanian is going to talk more about this data in a moment. But again, if you look at Memorial and Brookside right now, 1 out of 3 students at these schools, a little less than 1 out of 3 students at these schools are English learners. So what's the strategy in light of sort of this context? On the core academic side, we're going to continue doing the things that have helped us gain 13 points in the rankings over the past 2 years. We have an initiative at the high school called Writing with Colors, which is a very structured way of teaching students critical writing and composition that served us very, very well. We're continuing with that. We have a very effective math intervention that's demonstrated over a 2-year pilot called MCAS Math 10. We've tripled seat capacity for that program in the current school year after that 2-year pilot where it's demonstrated effective. We've launched a major co-teaching initiative for our students with disabilities and our English learners to help improve our teachers' capacity to do this really tough work of teaching students with disabilities and English learners in an inclusive environment. And we're going through a process of ongoing curriculum improvement. On the college and career readiness side, we're working very hard to try to strike partnerships with local colleges and universities to provide what's called early college programming to students. This is where students can earn college credit while in high school, hopefully at no cost to the student. This can significantly reduce the cost of a college education, which can be a game changer for an economically disadvantaged student. We're also in the process of trying to develop a system of work-based learning opportunities. For some of you who lived in Milford for a long time, this is sort of back to the future. So, a few decades ago, there was many students at Milford High School that were going out for co-ops and internships and apprenticeships. And I think it's high time that we sort of restore that to Milford High School. When 25% of our kids, or 1/3 of our kids, are in the workforce 3 months after graduation, and we have an obligation to provide these kids with an education that's going to allow them to enter the labor market and have skills to sell. We're overhauling our alternative program. And lastly and I think this is the most important part of our strategy, is we need to work very, very hard to develop articulated pathways in the STEM field: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we've got 3 underway, and there's a 4th that I hope to do. We've started a program in the building trades. We have launched programs this year in computer science and information technology and biomedical science, and I hope to have a program in advanced manufacturing. And the last thing I'd like to show you is that these articulated STEM pathways, we're not just sort of choosing these because we like them. This is very data-driven. So the Department of Labor in Massachusetts has done a very good job demonstrating what are the areas of the labor market in which they project growth. And they also break that down by sort of level of education. And the good news is that there are outstanding opportunities for graduates in Massachusetts who have credentials less than a 4-year college degree. So what you see here, these are all fields in Massachusetts that students can enter with only a high school diploma or a postgraduate certificate or a 2-year associate's degree. So if we look at the first 3, radiation therapists, MRI techs, and diagnostic medical sonographers, this is all biomedical science. These don't require 4-year degrees. Tremendous growth projections, and in 2017, we're seeing mean wages in these 3 fields between $82,000 and $93,000 a year. Keep in mind that Milford Regional Hospital is the 2nd largest employer in Milford after the town of Milford. Right? After that, we have web developers. That's our computer science IT program. Supervisors of construction trades. That's our building trades program. Computer network support specialists. Nuclear medicine technologists, cardiovascular technologists, supervisors of mechanics and installers. This includes advanced manufacturing, plumbers and pipe fitters, electricians, and carpenters. I'll just take carpenters at the bottom of the list. Projected 8.2% growth over the coming years, and students right out of high school can move into a field where average wages are $60,000 a year without any further education, and that's why we've launched this building trades program. So I want to thank you for your patience as I move through a lot of data, and I'll look forward to answering any questions you have about that in a bit. And I want to turn it over to Jen. Okay.
Hi, my name is Jen Noorjanian, and I will be talking to you briefly about our English Learner Program. This is my 7th year in the district as the EL director. I'll be using some terminology such as English learner. An English learner is a student that is currently receiving English language development within our programming. Former English learner is a student who has passed the Access for ELL state assessment and is now considered a former English learner. We're still required to monitor our former English learners for success in the mainstream classroom for 4 years after their exit date. And then first language not English is another term I'll be using. That's for students who are coming from a home that has a language other than English. English learner and a first language not English student is not synonymous, as students don't have to be bilingual and in an EL program. So our demographics have increased exponentially. I started this in 2011, 2012 with 269 students in the program, and at 705 when I presented last month to school committee, it was at 717, and today it was 727 students. So we are increasing on a weekly basis. January and February tend to be a large increase for us as the Southern Hemisphere and the students that we're seeing that arrive to Milford from Portugal, from Guatemala, from Ecuador. This is their summertime, and it is the perfect time to travel and move. So we're starting to see a larger increase in our school systems at this time. This is the percentage increase of our student body. So although Milford Public Schools EL numbers are growing, our numbers of students tend to stay around the 4,100, 4,200 students. And so obviously with the increase of number of Ls is an increase of student percentage. I'm going to pay close attention. I'd ask you to pay close attention to the bottom, because what I'd like you to see is what the 2017 numbers were, where they're located at each school, what percentage there is this year in 2018, and the growth. So what Mr. Otlin was talking about as far as the projection coming up through the school system and up to the high school is Brookside right now is at 28.1%. This year 28%. Memorial 34%. Remember the students I just said that's coming in? Today I reran these numbers, and it's 36% at Memorial and 21% at Woodland and 10.5% at Stacy, and it's remained about 9 to 10% at the high school. So this is an increase, and that is just the English learner population increase. So when students exit the program, we're still monitoring them for 4 years, which then is in this fourth column here with the EL and FEL numbers. So you can see that the EL department oversees 1,078 students in our school system, which is approximately 26% of the student body. But this doesn't just count for the students who are in the program. After 4 years, we no longer monitor them because they are showing success in mainstream classroom. But that doesn't mean that their home language that they're going home to every day has changed. So in our October SIMS report just recently, there's 33.3% of the student body goes home to a home that has a language other than English, which means we need, many families need interpreters to communicate. And this just shows you the increase of percentages of first language not English over the past, since 2011. This is on school profiles on DESI data dashboard. This is where our families are coming from. So majority of our students are Brazilian Portuguese speaking, and this is our EL population, and then Spanish, and then Arabic, and minority languages for Milford. But when you include all of our students, you can move to the next one, you can see that it still pretty much stays consistent. Our largest is Portuguese and Spanish speaking homes. And so taking the average over the past couple years, we gain an average of 1.5% because students are exiting and more students, kindergartners are coming in, students are moving. So around an average of 1.5% increase each year.
Hi, my name is Lucy Jenkins. I'm the Special Education Director for Milford Public Schools. This is my third year in this role, and I've been with the district in the department for 19 years. So the goal of special education is to ensure that all of our students with disabilities have the same opportunities as their non-disabled peers in order to succeed in the school. Next. Some types of services. So just so you know, we have about approximately 721 students that are on individualized education programs in our district. We have services that we provide are inclusion, which is in all of our buildings, which means that in any classroom there are a percentage of students with and without disabilities. We have small group services, substantially separate classrooms in each of our buildings. So Shining Star Preschool and Brookside Woodland and Stacy Middle School all have a Milestones program, which is a substantially separate program servicing students on the autism spectrum. Memorial and Woodland have an ETC classroom, which is early therapeutic classroom that is specifically designed for students with significant behavioral and emotional needs. And then we have at Woodland a language-based classroom, and at Milford High School we have pre-voc and vocational classrooms. If a student comes to us and we are unable to meet their specific needs in our district, then we look for a placement outside of the school district where they will be able to get their needs met. Next. Some of the service providers for our students, special education teachers, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists. You can see the whole list. If there's a student, whatever our students' needs are, if we don't have a service provider or a service, then we make sure that we consult with somebody else. But I think we're very well staffed in our department to provide for the needs of all of our students. Next. So every 5 years, every single district goes through a coordinated program review with the Department of Early and Secondary Education. Our department did phenomenal. We were in great shape before I even came to the position. So out of the 59 special education criteria, we've met 58 of them. One of them was partially met, but we're in great shape. This year and the past year, 2 years that I've been here, we have a Special Education Parent Advisory Council. By law, every district needs to have a Parent Advisory Council. If you don't, then you can partner with another district, or you would apply for a waiver. But like I said, since I've been here, we have a fantastic group of parents who work with us and with the community to talk about the needs of our students. And that's it.
So now we open it up for the question and answer part of the program, and just like to articulate to you some rules for this Q&A period. We'd like to ask you to keep it to the questions directed to the superintendent of schools or the school committee. Please indicate who you would wish to respond. One question at a time. Then someone else gets a turn. And then you can return for another question when everybody else is done. Donna?
We also ask that you do not interrupt anyone who is speaking at the time. Please give them an opportunity to finish the questions that they are asking, and also give an opportunity to those responding to completely finish. Please be respectful of one another. And we do have to ask that the program finish by 8:45 p.m. so we can respect the rules of the library that they were kind enough to host us this evening. So we will take your questions at this time.
So basically what happens, and I'm going to have maybe Jen follow up on my answer because it probably won't be nearly as complete as hers. One of the things that happens is we're getting a higher percentage of students that enter in kindergarten. And that's been happening for the last, both Brookside and Memorial. Woodland serves grades 3 through 5. So they're older students. And basically what happens is the average length of time a student, the goal from the state is 5 years, Jen, is that correct? So the goal is to have students exit the program in 5 years. So you'll see the numbers when they get up to Woodland, Stacy, and the high school drop because students in kindergarten are generally exiting the program when they hit Woodland. Now, we're also getting English learners that are starting at a variety of levels. So an English learner, when they come to us, we assess them, and they're rated. They're basically categorized either level 0, which means they have no English skills whatsoever, to level 5, where they're pretty close to being able to kind of access curriculum like a native speaker would to some degree. So we really don't have a choice in terms of kind of how we can distribute the students. Because they're kind of entering at all grade levels, but we tend to, like our percentage at kindergarten where most students enter the Milford Public Schools, that percentage is consistently increasing. You're seeing a decrease as they go to Woodland and Stacy because students are exiting the program. Did I miss anything, Jen? Okay. And I believe we communicated via email at least one time, maybe on a couple occasions. I think your particular situation with your daughter, and I hate to kind of focus on one individual situation, was an unfortunate one because we love bringing Milford graduates back to teach in the Milford Public Schools, and there's a number of Milford graduates teaching in the schools. I think we're constantly looking at how we do the hiring process, and one aspect of the hiring process is the practicum, which that's what students who are completing their education programs do, which ends up being kind of an extended interview. And you know, the only thing I can say is I apologize for that experience with your daughter. We try to, you know, we try to accommodate, you know, students across the board when they're looking for practicums. A variety of factors impact that. One is you know, and again, I don't know exactly what grade level she was, and I don't want to get into like an individual situation, but I would say when we wrapped up, let's have a quick conversation. It's definitely something. It's definitely something we can look at. There's no question. I think and I think it's a valid criticism.
So in the context of comparison of other districts, specifically in our area and in comparison to state, it is exponentially. Milford's, as Mr. Otlin was presenting around demographics, the EL numbers for Milford in comparison to EL numbers in districts surrounding us has grown exponentially. But if you're looking at the EL numbers in comparison maybe to Milford in its growth, I can see how you may have viewed it that way.
I think we shared some of those metrics this evening. You know, we have a number of metrics we look at. Harold and I have had this conversation multiple times. You know, I think you can look at college attendance rates, which Principal Otlin shared with the group. You can look at MCAS scores, which you know, on the EL side are definitely on the rise. The math side, I think we're going to see an improvement. You can look at you know, where are we placing students that aren't going to college, which I think we've got a very clear plan in place for how we're going to arrive at that through a variety of programs that are connecting students to a number of careers that will result in not, you know, poverty level wages, but, you know, the opportunity to live a middle class plus lifestyle. So I think there's a lot of pieces in place that are leading to that. There's also, for anybody interested who's either here in the audience or watching at home, we have an education plan that kind of lays out over, it started last year. We're in the second year of a 3-year plan. We're going to start the process of kind of reiterating that plan this summer. And I think there's a number of areas where there's kind of clear measurement available. Yeah, no, I think the most important thing that happened is that what happens to the students when they graduate, and I think we've got a clear plan in place for that. I think I could you know, talk about numbers in, you know, each subgroup at each level, and you know, some of them would be accurate and some of them would be inaccurate. Our goal each year is really to reduce gaps in achievement on the MCAS by approximately 50%. You know, there's areas where we've done that. There's other areas where we're putting plans in place to kind of provide, you know, kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? To provide kind of like an improvement in those areas. But I think it's also important to note that I think there's an overemphasis on MCAS that really narrows the curriculum, and we're trying to stay away from that because we're seeing students who are, you know, interested in the arts, interested in music, interested in you know, a robust science curriculum, which we're trying to provide even at the elementary school, that a lot of districts have moved away from. And I think the ultimate outcome, and I think we could dance around this all night, and you can ask the question in different ways, but really, what's happening when students are graduating? And right now, Milford High School is a comprehensive high school, which is very similar to all, you know, the other comprehensive high schools across the Commonwealth that really are not designed, they're designed for kind of college readiness. And we're trying to kind of move in a direction where we're also college and career readiness, so that 20 to 30% of students who you know, aren't attending college 3 months after graduation have a viable pathway.
Sure. So in terms of sources to point you towards, in terms of labor market opportunities, and I'd be happy to sort of follow up with the organizers of the event and share some resources that they can put out, you know, on your website. But the Massachusetts Department of Labor actually offers, I think, very accessible statistics on labor market projections, and they offer those labor market projections across sort of a lot of different dimensions, right? So you can, you know, look at 4-year degrees, 2-year degrees, certificates. So I think as a resource for trying to understand sort of, you know, what do economists believe are going to be the opportunities of the future, that's where you can find them. I'm fairly familiar with those projections, and I think I can tell you in short that, you know, we know in Massachusetts that adults who have technical, specialized knowledge in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are bringing knowledge and skills that are highly valued into the economy, and they're compensated as such, right? So there's certainly a premium placed on those skills. I think to speak to the other part of your question is one of my priorities as the principal is trying to work with my colleagues to really improve our entire post-secondary counseling program, which I believe needs to start in the summer before students enter 9th grade, is when I need to start talking with families and talking with students about coming up with a long-range set of goals and goals that are well aligned to a student's sort of achievement profile. And also that I think frankly is well aligned to the family's means. And I think once we look at sort of a family's means, we look at the type of student that we're dealing with, and we look at what that student is interested in and passionate about, I think then we can try to find out where our programs align to that profile and point them in a direction towards the appropriate labor market opportunity. The last thing I'd say, and I'm not sure if Dr. McIntyre has anything to add, is I think a big part of us helping our students and our families take advantage of those labor market opportunities is establishing strong partnerships with institutions of higher education in the region. So I used a phrase earlier in my presentation that's it's kind of a jargon phrase, so I want to unpack it a little bit. I talked about articulated pathways, so let me sort of explain what that means for a moment. In an ideal world, let's say that I have a student who's interested in studying computer science or information technology and networking. And I'd like to be able to say to this young man or young woman, listen, if you take these 4 classes here at Milford High School, we have agreements with these 3 colleges and universities where they will accept those courses for 9 or 12 credits, right, which will significantly accelerate your progress towards a post-secondary credential and significantly reduce the cost of post-secondary education. So, Kevin and I are actually going out to LaSalle College tomorrow to talk just about this very topic. And so I think that's going to be a big part of my work to try to help channel students and families towards the appropriate labor market opportunities.
If I could actually add to that just a little bit. The other piece of it, and I think Josh had a pretty thorough answer. The other piece of it is partnerships with local businesses and organizations. So through our hotel and hospitality program, we partner with 2 hotels as well as a travel agency. Business and banking has, I believe, 5 corporate partnerships right now, and the building trades is connected to the Estate Building Trades Association. So we're really trying to kind of make those connections so students can already start the networking process, so that it leads to kind of either gainful employment or some kind of relationship. And the other piece of it is those college programs, because we'd like to get kids a head start. When you talk early college, if a student, Josh shared some statistics with you on, students who are coming from economically disadvantaged backgrounds and their low completion rates for college. If a student takes an early college course and they're economically disadvantaged, their likelihood of success goes up dramatically. We could spend all night kind of hitting the who, what, where, and why kind of piece of it, but let me talk about first our academically gifted or talented students. And at the high school level, we offer 19 AP courses that those students can engage in, which I think is I think a broader offering than any other district in the area, just in terms of sheer breadth of offerings. The other thing that we offer, I think at the high school level, and then we can kind of work our way down, and maybe Craig can speak to some of those pieces, is we really offer kind of a broad range of elective opportunities. We have, and I would consider world language a core academic, but there's 5 different languages that students can take at Milford High School, and each of those can end in an AP experience for the students. We have a video production program that's fantastic. We have computer science offerings. We just added, and Josh alluded to this in his presentation, Project Lead the Way courses, which are rigorous, engaging, high-level STEM programming. At the middle school level, there's a number of kind of engaging project-based learning activities, and I think when you talk gifted in the typical student, I think when you see when we talk about roughly 70-ish% of students are going to college or four-year colleges, those students are are set up for success. And and they're doing very well. I can have Craig talk a little bit about kind of the who, what, why of what we're teaching, and maybe answer that part of the question. But we basically, from the time they get to preschool to somebody taking like physics or chemistry in high school, there's a ton of things that go on in the Milford Public Schools that meet that kind of average student, that meet the kind of academically gifted student, and set them both up for success.
Thanks for your question, Mr. Arcudi. I think you highlighted one of the biggest issues in our district right now. We do have that range of students, right? And I think I spoke to it earlier about the tiered instruction. So in your classroom, sitting in front of you, we're at, I'm not sure if anybody spoke about this, but we have a 49% high needs population, which means that in front of us, 1 out of every 2 has some kind of need. So the job of the teacher is to teach each of those students at the level they're at. So that comes through assessments, assessing students at the beginning of any unit to see where they're at, and then formatively assessing students throughout the unit and regrouping accordingly. So if students are demonstrating that they already understand material, teachers will differentiate instruction to offer them a different pathway or a different plan. Not necessarily more work, but maybe a different way of showing how they can, what they know. And then, that starts all the way down at kindergarten and goes all the way up. When you start to get into middle school, then we start to have different levels. So, students that demonstrate a better understanding of material might be put into a higher level, where it's easier for teachers to kind of reach those higher students and still be able to bring up some of the other kids that can do that too. Sorry, Mr. Sure.
Can I just add one
Right.
thing?
Absolutely.
I just think the community's investment in our technology has facilitated that as well, because now that we're a one-to-one district with the Chromebooks with grade 3 through 12, it makes it easier for the teachers to be able to access that. So if you have a student that's able to go further or faster, it facilitates them being able to do that. So just thanks to the town for supporting that.
Kevin or Craig, can you also touch on the focus on the whole student? Because I think it's another way that Milford differentiates itself as well. We're not just strong from an academic perspective. Actually, I'm going to have them answer it. So, so we're not just strong from an academic perspective, but we have a lot to offer in terms of athletics, music, arts, across the entire spectrum. So can you talk a little bit about that and what we have to offer?
Sure. So I don't think it's a secret that about our music program, right? There's regular performances that we have, and a lot of instrumental lessons and things like that happen during the day, but they also happen after school. Choruses happen after school. As far as athletics, you're right, athletics are happening usually after school. But one of the other things that, in my 21 years in Milford, one of the differences that I've seen as the years have gone on is the social emotional needs of the students, and teachers having to do a lot more counseling, and then having to be able to have professional counselors as well. We just hired a couple more counselors at our social worker, at our K-5 school. And it's something that, geez, you wouldn't, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, you wouldn't think you would need a social worker in our school, but it's the nature of the beast right now, unfortunately. So, it's something also that I think teachers don't get enough credit for is that part of the job. People focus on a math score or a reading score, but they don't realize just the the reinforcement, the positive reinforcement that the teachers give kids on a daily basis. And you know, we talked about our 2 students here, you know, how difficult it is for maybe one or both of those students to get to school every day, and for teachers to be able to differentiate for the 2 is just incredible. So our teachers deserve a lot of credit.
My answer will not be anywhere near as data-driven as you would like it to be, Jerry. We have more data people in the room, and then we have some social-emotional people in the room, and somewhere in the middle we have to have a middle ground. But I know one thing we've been talking about tonight through the presentations of our administrators and talk around the table with school committee, talk between school committee and FinCom, are the changing demographics of this town. And there is no way, and I may never get reelected for making the statement that I'm going to tonight, but it's the God's honest truth. We're surrounded by communities that are very different demographically, socioeconomically, culturally than Milford. Some families appreciate and value and love the largeness of Milford, the diversity of Milford, the robust offerings we have here because of the different types of students and families that we have. And I see our public schools celebrate that. I've got a student in 10th grade and a student in the 7th grade, and I've seen it from the very beginning. If a family makes a choice to say, I want a more homogeneous experience, I don't like the size of Woodland. I know we've talked a lot about Woodland as the big new elementary school. We put a lot of money into that. They'll stay when we build Woodland. You can't change some people's perspectives, and you may not be able to change the fact that for some children, a smaller, more contained educational setting may be a better choice for them. This may not be the choice for all students and families. We are located, we talk about this all the time, in a very unique geographic position where we're surrounded by relatively affluent, relatively white communities that are a very short drive away from our public schools. I will tell you, having been a public educator for 20 plus years in districts that are different from Milford, these people over here run circles around administration in many other districts. When you have a high-performing district, and to Josh's point, when your students come from families with 2 highly educated parents with those higher degrees where parents can help be involved, those students, that kid in that chair has a very different experience. And our administration has a lot of work to do to offer diverse offerings and put our children on a path that can meet the needs of all students. So I would say, and I would argue that I don't think that there is an answer to how we're going to fix school choice other than having these people do the work that they've been doing for a long time and that I see them continuing to do on a daily basis. We can't change all of that, but what I will say, and I know I'm taking a lot of time, this is a town issue. This is not a school district issue. And when we sit around the table and say, we need a social worker, we need a bilingual social worker, we need our town to come together for those supports. It's not just our schools. We're one hugely important part of that, but this is a community issue, and I do think our community needs to put money behind this for all families.
Well, just along those points, David brings up a great point there. The most important thing that we can do as a community is increase economic development within Milford and create jobs for these families to lift them out of poverty. Because if you can do that, ultimately the students are going to perform better. And the only other thing I'll add to Jerry's point, and I'll forward the email over to you, Jerry, but we did share a very detailed plan of how we're addressing school choice at the subcommittee level. So I'll forward that along to you. But a lot of that starts with family engagement, and there's been a lot of work done by the administrators and by our teachers to increase family engagement. We have a presentation that the high school does every year down at Stacy to promote all the different programs and services that we have to offer at the high school to encourage kids to stay in the district. We've built relationships between a lot of the high school students and a lot of the elementary school students and middle school students. There's a lot of good work being done there to engage with families, engage with students, and really promote the Milford Public Schools. I don't know if you want to talk about some of the other things that we're doing in terms of school choice.
I kind of want to address the issue a little more broadly, if I can just jump in.
Yeah. Just before I hand it off to you, the other thing I want to address too, sorry, because I know you focus on the dollars. Jerry's very focused on the money and the $2 million, and it's a valid point, and it's going to take. Absolutely, and it's going to take time before you start to see those numbers shift, because as Jen pointed out, once once a family school choice is out, you've lost that family. It's hard to bring that family back. So the key is keeping the younger kids that are coming in, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, keeping them in the Milford School District. But that school choice number that you're talking about, the $2 million, and I know we've talked about per pupil spending a lot, that number is actually factored into the per pupil spending. So our per pupil spending right now is well below the state average, and that includes the $2 million that we're sending out to other districts. So we're already $1,800 per student lower than the state average, even factoring in some of these additional expenses. So there also needs to be more of an investment done at the community level into our schools to provide them with the resources they need to be successful.
So can I just make one more response, Steve, before you jump to the next thing? I think there's three important points that I want to make. One is, as a public school anywhere in either Massachusetts or the United States, we accept anyone who walks through our doors, and that's our charge and our charter. The second thing is we love every student that comes through our doors, and we meet them where they are, and we try to get them where they need to go. And I think part of these kinds of discussions, you can demonize or villainize certain groups, and I want to make sure that everybody in the audience and at home knows that whether a student comes from an economically disadvantaged background, has special needs, is an English learner, we provide them the best possible services because we want them to kind of get where they want to go. And we see students make tremendous progress, especially the students that we have when we get them in kindergarten and they graduate with us in 12 years. And in terms of school choice, there's two trends that I think are important to know. And Jerry, I'm worried that you're confusing the school choice number with the out of district number, which are two separate things. Yeah. Yeah, so two things I want to say about the trends. One is we saw a big uptick, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, and again, I don't have it right in front of me, in terms of the students that are choicing out. And it's leveled off and it's starting to decline slightly. The other thing we're seeing is a tremendous influx of students who want to choice into Milford. And because we're trying to maintain class sizes and the quality of education, we have to turn a lot of students who want to choice into Milford away. So I think it's starting to trend, but I think one thing that's important for the finance committee and the public at large to know is once a student choices into Milford Public Schools, they tend to stay, once they get here, whatever grade level they come in at. When a student choices out, they also tend to stay in whatever district they go to because most parents want kind of a consistent education experience for their children. The other piece that I think that appears on that cherry sheet is we're seeing a much more competitive environment where families have options, and that's true of anywhere in the state. We have charter schools. We have several online charter schools that students are able to attend now that have cropped up in the last several years. So families have more choice. What we're trying to do, and really to kind of put the strategy into one line, is we want to make the Milford Public Schools the choice for every family. That's really the goal. That's actually a big debate that goes on amongst our teachers, actually, is how much we focus on like writing and penmanship versus keyboarding. And the world is moving in a direction where, honestly, the only time I actually write anything, and it's a good thing because my penmanship is horrible and I would be embarrassed to show you anything I've handwritten.
If you were in my class, I would have said, just make it readable.
and for me, that's a colossal struggle. It's something that we're wrestling with because, like a lot of the state assessments, for example, are taken online. So we want to make sure our students can kind of access the keyboard and understand kind of how to respond on computers. Yeah, there's kind of a few things at play there. One is the charter school number, I believe, is different than the school choice number. And two, if a student has so if the $5,000 is a general education number, and if a student has like special needs or is an English learner, there's an additional there's an additional amount that's added to that. So the out number is a combination of a few different lines, where the in number is strictly school choice in. So I think that's part of where the differential comes from. Yeah, so actually that's a great point. Last year we actually got a 7.7% increase from the state in terms of Chapter 70 allocation, and that's because the state legislature, I think, and as well as the governor, is committed to try to kind of close the gap in terms of fully funding what's called the foundation budget. So we're anticipating hopefully another large increase. We haven't seen the initial numbers yet. But again, we're hoping because they're trying to further close that gap. Yeah, so you're talking about technical assistance, and we did receive some technical assistance from, there's regional groups around the state called DSACs, and I couldn't tell you what that acronym stands for. But I think I think the results I think you're seeing is we're starting to trend in a positive direction. And one of the issues we had is, we didn't have the infrastructure to deal with kind of the rapid increase in both economically disadvantaged students and EL students. So we were kind of building the plane to some degree as it was taking off. So each year, I think folks on the finance committee and Jerry left, but each year we're making additional requests for English learner teachers, and the requirements of that program are going up from a state level. So from a reporting perspective, it's very similar to special education. So we're constantly kind of adding on because, again, the average student is becoming more expensive to teach. So it's been a process where, although we've known it's coming, schools just generally are not flexible institutions. So if we don't if we have like the English department, and the English department at the high school is doing very well right now. But if say they're underperforming in a corporation, you can kind of sell that division off. We can't really do that in schools because we have to educate everybody. So what we've had to do is we've had to kind of build these programs as the population has increased. And what you saw at the high school is you saw a dip. We've kind of put the infrastructure in place, at least in the EL, from an EL perspective, and you're starting to see the scores go up again. And I think you've seen that kind of at each level to some degree. Woodland took a similar trajectory. Where there was a dip for a couple years, and then it's back on the upswing because, again, the structures and the programs are in place. Prior to the students coming, we didn't need those structures or programs because we didn't have that many EL students. This is just one example. I think that's a simple question that requires kind of a very complex and nuanced answer. I think you're going to see an uptick. If I'm predicting, I think you're going to see an uptick at the high school level in math scores because we have more students who are in that MCAS 10 course where they were struggling based on their 8th grade MCAS. I think you're going to see a bump there. I think you're going to see consistency with the ELA scores because we've seen a tremendous uptick in the last 2 years there, not only in achievement but also in growth. Last year, I don't think a single student failed the test. And this year, over 62% of the students who took the test fell into the advanced category. Now, the tricky part about the analysis is going to be that the 10th grade MCAS this year is moving to the MCAS 2.0, so the system is completely changing. The rest of the schools already went through that change, so it's going to be hard to do like an apples-to-apples comparison. It's going to take a few years to kind of get a sense of kind of where we are. So I'll respond to that. I think it's two separate questions. One is there's no plan right now to move the preschool out of the high school. So that's a quick and easy one. I would say our security across the district as well as with the preschool is outstanding. We have a great partnership with the Milford Police Department where we have 2 school resource officers that are able to respond to any school in the district within usually less than a minute or two. On top of that, we have security cameras. We have locked entry. We require everybody in the district to wear a badge when they're in the building. If anybody happens not to get a badge, they're stopped immediately. So I'd say the security is actually outstanding. We also have to address issues like fire codes and things like that. So that with internal flow, it's a different story than external flow. So if that parent would like to reach out to me directly, if you want to encourage them to reach out to me directly, more than happy to have a conversation. And I would just say have them forward the email to me directly, and I'm happy to talk to them. I would say no on the regrets on middle school East simply because it would have cost us somewhere between, I'd say, $20 and $30 million to kind of bring that up to a place where we could have it as a long-term kind of facility. I think some of the longer term needs, like when we talk about advanced manufacturing, I think in some of the career and technical education opportunities is really going to be a lot of like on-site experiences for students because we're never going to put in an advanced manufacturing floor in a comprehensive high school institution, for example. Obviously, we're always looking for more space. I think our space crunch is more we have kind of uncharacteristically large numbers at both 7th and 8th grade right now, which is kind of just a population bubble that's kind of driving some of those crunches at Stacy. But the classes kind of following it are more typically sized.